Hey. Okay, I just did another recording and I was doing too much. I'm still gonna do too much, but it was like too much. So I re-recorded this. Hi, everybody. Hello. My name is Kayla Silvers. This is Silver Linings. Welcome to my new-ish page. It's called Silver Linings 560, which I did not love, but Silver Linings was already taken. When I was in high school, everyone called me Silver in this theater program I was in, and I don't know, it's just really cool. And so I've been looking at the silver linings of life recently after some stuff has happened to me. So I decided to change the page, name. Y'all, it's late here. As you can see, it's dark outside. Okay, so I decided to change the page name. Yes, page name to Silver Linings, but I got Silver Linings 560, so here I am. But my name is Kayla, spelled like Kyla, Kyla, Silvers, Sylvers. You can pretty much find me any and everywhere. I am an actor, writer, producer who has currently been living abroad. I'm at a friend's place right now because I am going back to the States. I'm currently in Mexico right now. So, yeah, and I will have some vlogs on that as well on the page, doing some vlogging. Gonna show you guys some places that I ate while I was here and stuff like that. So, it'll be really, really cool and fun. So, you guys can check that out as well. If you're interested in me as a filmmaker, I am an actor, writer, producer. I don't know if I just said that 10 seconds ago, but I'm saying it again in case I didn't. I do have a page called Melanin Magic Productions, so feel free to follow that as well. We have a current hit web series over there as well. It's called, can I say the S word? It rhymes with text, vlogs, and kidnappings. And that would either be in the top left or right corner of this video, or will be in the description below, or will be in both places. So you guys will be able to click on that. I'm also going to be bringing my podcast back called You, Me, and the Multiverse, which you will also be able to listen to this review and discussion there as well, in case you're not able to like watch this video in its entirety. So yeah, I'm so excited. So let's get to why we are all here today. We are here to talk about Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story. Ah! I am so excited to talk about this for sure. I have so many thoughts. It was quite wonderful. I was sobbing by the end, as I think any kind of normal existing person in the universe was. And it was beautiful. It was not without its problems, but it was beautiful, and it was my favorite Bridgerton story. Um, so I'm just gonna give you guys a little summary about it. I write everything down, so bear with me. But like I said, today we will be talking about Queen Charlotte. By the way, I didn't say this in the intro, but if you do like this, feel free to like, subscribe, comment. Actually, please comment, because I do want to talk to you guys about this show. That's why I'm here. So, like, let's discuss and talk and talk and discuss. All right. So, here is a summary. All right, so Queen Charlotte is a deeply heartfelt and super cute Netflix prequel series that takes place in the Bridgerton universe. It is a fictitious story based on fact. The series explores the love story between rumored biracial Queen Charlotte, definitely biracial Queen Charlotte, we will get to that later, and her husband, the Mad King George. They are one of the few royal couples who everyone confirms was definitely in love, because George never took a side piece and kept pumping kids into Charlotte. Although, I think the real question should be, what was Charlotte doing? Was she taking a side piece? Do we really know? I'm kidding. But in all seriousness, This story explores the ups and downs of being in a relationship with someone who has severe mental illness back during a time when doctors were just idiots who simply had a paper degree that gave them permission to use humans as experiments for their weird medical practices. Starring India Amartifio, I apologize if I mispronounced that, and Corey Malcrease as Queen Charlotte and King George, along with an ensemble of other extremely, very attractive people. It was written by Shonda Rhimes and directed by the white man who has pictures of a dead girl on his phone. If you know, you know. This Bridgerton series may just be the best Bridgerton to ever Bridgerton, while also featuring not a single Bridgerton. Well, not technically, because Violet was not a Bridgerton yet. And this show is now airing on Netflix. All right, so let's jump into it. Okay, so first thoughts, drum roll. Ooh. As I said, I loved it. I will say I did have to use cognitive dissonance when it came to some race things, but overall, their job was to get me to be romantic, and they got me to be romantic. They got me with the romance. Just put my blinders on for some of the other things, which I will get to later. And I think that this is a very hopeful story for those like me who suffer from chronic mental illness or just mental health disorders, and however you want to define that. And so I do love that about the series. Y'all, I just realized right now that I have this other little light that I have not turned on yet. Let's see if it'll make any kind of difference. Let me see what that's going to look like, because that could actually look crazy. Let's see. Because let's see. I'm not actually sure if I want to use this light. I'm looking right now like, nah. mm, mm. It's like, nah, let's use it. Let's use it. We'll fix it later. So you may see a light change in this video. This is my first, okay? Anyway, you can skip this part. Okay, so back to it. Yeah, so I loved it. Like I said, there was a little bit of cognitive dissonance that I had to kind of have when when watching, but I did overall think that they did a really good job. It was my favorite uh, version of the Bridgerton story. I actually really loved the first season of Bridgerton. I know some people swear by the second season. I love the first season because we really got to see Simon and Daphne fall in love and like understand why they were falling in love with one another, which I think is really important to really kind of see how the bond is formed. And I don't think we really got to see that in season two. In season two, we had these two really great actors who really sold that they were into each other, but we don't really get a lot of scenes of them like talking to each other. Like we get the one scene in the rain, but like that's it. And I hear in the book there's a lot of points of connection for them. I haven't read the books, and we just don't really get those points of connection in season two. And so for me, it was just a lot of like kind of heavy breathing and not enough like actually talking and seeing why they fell in love, which I think season one of Bridgerton really does right. And I think this show really does right. And I think what I'm looking for when I'm looking for romance is I'm looking for heat and I'm looking for the swoon worthiness of it, but I'm also looking for a couple that I feel like meshes well as a couple, and could work. Because when we see a show, we get like whatever version of their happily ever after, right? Oh, and they live happily ever after. But do I actually believe that this couple is going to live happily ever after? That is the question. So I think that season one and season in this season of Bridgerton do a better job of showing me that in a way that I feel like the only reason I could trust that they'll live happily ever after in the second season is because one, they're supposed to and two, because the actors are convincing, but there's nothing really in the text that tells me that. So anyway, sorry for you season two lovers. That's just like how I am feeling about this season. So just that that I mean about that season, not this season, but about that season. But yeah, so that just is what it is. All right, so moving on to this show that we are actually talking about today. I just feel like I just gave so much time and shade to season two. People are gonna come for my neck. All right, so let's get on to the Great Experiment. Whew, okay, the Great Experiment. Interesting choice of words. So of course because they never like set. It's funny. Like when we started Bridgerton, I thought it was going to be colorblind casting, which I'm not a big fan of. But then in season one of Bridgerton is clear between a conversation between Lady Danbury and Simon that it's actually not colorblind casting. So in this world, Charlotte marrying King George, soft-ish racism, or gives the illusion that racism is soft, which is a really interesting choice. We'll get to that later. But our girl Charlotte is yanked from Germany and forced to kind of marry this guy, and we go through all. It seems like it's gonna be really beautiful and really cute and really lovely, and we go through like this really meet cute with them, and all this great stuff in the first episode, only for all of that to sort of be torn apart by the end of the episode when he like mysteriously backs out of everything. So which is really interesting. Before we jump into that, I do want to say that as far as Queen Charlotte goes, she is obviously in the show played by a biracial black woman, and there's been a lot of theories over the years on whether or not she actually was biracial. I mean, the portraits say what the portraits say. And okay, here's the thing. One thing about me is I can spot black people anywhere. Okay, a lot of people are like, "Oh, Meghan Markle could easily pass," blah blah blah. And you know what? She can't. I'm not gonna lie to you. She can't. But here's the thing. One day I was watching Suits. It just came up on my TV, and one of my favorite Afro Latinas is on the show in a lead role, but she's like the only black woman who I remember ever been on the show. And so I remember I was watching the show and I saw Meghan Markle. I was like, they got another black girl on the show? Since when? I like knew right away. I will say I did go Google right after to make sure I was right. But one thing about me is I can spot Negroes. Okay, I can spot a black person. I can see one. I can see it in them, even if it's just like a little smidget. I can tell. So based on the portraits we've seen, I've seen the ones that make her look more white, which I think is a really interesting thing they actually addressed in the show too. Of the princess, aka the king's mom, making the painter make her lighter, which is a really interesting thing to do because history is always told from the perspective of the conqueror. And there are a lot of historical things that have been altered in that way. That's not the first time a person has been lightened in a portrait. That's not the first time that history has been erased in some way. People have destroyed whole tribes and communities, their religious texts, their way that they communicated, have destroyed entire systems that we haven't been able to see because of stuff like that. People set fires to things. They alter the way people look and things to, especially if it's a place that believes that they're superior to another place, or if they're a place that doesn't want another place's beliefs to get to other people because they feel like people may switch sides. It could be a power move. So many things. So I thought that was a really interesting thing to do in the show because it is actually a thing that has happened throughout history. Now I can't say that that happened with the actual Queen Charlotte, but it is an interesting thing that happened. But based on the pictures that I've seen of her, that has happened. But based on the pictures that I've seen of her, both the more white leaning ones and the more black leaning ones, I do believe that she was biracial. Whether or not that was her direct parentage or if it was a grandparent who they had never heard of, seen, or if back then they called it being a bastard. I think that was a term you could also get to women. I'm not sure, but if she was born of like mysterious parentage, but she definitely has some black in her somewhere. I know some people are like, oh, that rumor has been debunked, but I'm like, we don't know everything. They don't know everything. Nobody knows everything. And I'm telling you off those pictures, there's Negro somewhere in there. And that's the end of the conversation for me. But anyway, back to the show. So yeah, so our homegirl is brought in to be with this guy, and starts off well, doesn't go well, da da da, and we find out that obviously he's dealing with um issues. So it's believed that King George had either bipolar disorder or a blood disorder. I was about to look it up. I'm not. I should have wrote it down beforehand. But it starts with a P. And unfortunately, as I said in my summary, back then, doctors didn't really know much, and they were just kind of trying anything, which is also theorized that's how his condition became worse because he got poisoned somehow from some of the treatments that they were trying on him. So it's probably a combination of things. I love that the show addresses the weight of a king and having all of that on him. And there's also beliefs that he probably suffered from chronic depression. So I do think when you have chronic depression and you're kind of in this system that automatically, you know, tells you that that you are less than or somehow inept if you are dealing with these things, even though I think it's a very valid issue. Like he said, he said, like, I couldn't eat certain vegetables without the kingdom being ruined. So it's like when you have that kind of pressure on your back all the time, it is it can be very difficult mentally. And I think his mom brought up a good point when she was defending him after Queen Charlotte finds out, and she's just like, he's overwhelmed with the duty of being a king. He is nothing wrong with him. And I do think that's true. Now, I think if that wasn't her son going through it with somebody else, she would have been a lot less lenient during that time period. But I do think it being her son forces her to kind of see the other side, because she's obviously been with him since his birth, which I thought was really just wonderful, right? So she's plucked into this. Obviously, we know that when they meet, they fall into like right away. I mean, he ain't too bad to marry. And then by the end of the first episode, he's yelling. He's like, "I'm just George," and then he's yelling at her, talking about some, "I'm your king," and she's like, oh, "Damn, okay, well, I must have forgot, King." And I love that scene too. She's like, "I thought she was just George." And then he yells at her, and I was like, "You can will that back, sir. You can will that back." So I thought that was great. I knew about his backstory. I can't remember like how much I knew at that point. Like if I did the deep dive in the middle of the series, or I don't remember. I knew he was like the Mad King at that point. And obviously, I know about the dementia from the flagship series. But I will say, at the end of episode one, I was like, "What is going on?" Like, I even with knowing what I knew, I was still so confused, which I think is great. That means that the writers have done something great when that happens, where you're still just like, hold up, I know this story, and I'm like, still confused myself. So that means that, they're taking you on the journey. And so I think that, you know, everything, like Charlotte is obviously smitten by him from the beginning, and everything she's going through I just feel, right? Because she's this person that's like in the dark about what's happening, and she actually likes her husband and like actually wants to be around him. And so not being armed with the correct information is frustrating, because you're like, okay, I thought we had a meet cute. I thought we had a little something, something. I thought that kiss at the wedding was nice. Maybe I was wrong. So, going through that in your brain can be like a lot. So I like really, really, really felt for her. And I really felt for her even when she went and confronted his mother when she does find out. And I like that she didn't, when she confronted him, she didn't say anything about his disability or his mental disability, but more so that she didn't know, that no one was honest with her. Because she even says when she's like getting dressed in that first episode, she was like, "Is he slow? Is he this? Is he that?" She was like, "Because I can work on all that, right?" So she's the person, type of person who's like, if I like the person, if they're interesting, like I will make whatever work. We can work with that, you know? But the fact that I don't know is the issue, you know? And so I thought that that was like also great because, and I get it, like during that time period, not everybody is going to be so welcoming of being partnered with someone who is ill. Um, but Charlotte obviously was, and of course, I think part of the reason why she was open to it is because she actually really does like this man. She's interested in what he's interested in. They have a good rapport. They can make jokes together. They can talk together. Like, and again, they, you know, she's interested in the things he's interested in, and he is interested, I think, in things she's interested in. So it just I think works, and she knows that, and he knows that, and so I think that's also why she's so like, you know, willing to be with him. Speaking of, I love like parallel, so I love when she's like smashing her nose on the window. And she's like watching him with his shirt off. She's like, he is really farming. And she's just like so distracted from everything Lady Danbury say. And then he like also watches her play chess. And I just love stuff like that. I also love everything with the dog because Queen Charlotte has like 10 little dogs in the present. Right, like she's holding one in the present. All of her like assistants are always holding. There's always a dog, like a tiny dog, and now we know like where that came from because it started with. So I just thought that, you know, even like the rare jewel thing, he tells her that she says that in the present. So there is this kind of just like beautiful story with them that I just like I adored. I adored. And I think that, of course, I have some problems with episode 4, but I do love that we get to see, because we see a lot of Charlotte, like, wanting him and going after him, but we get to see in episode 4 that he was doing a similar thing. And he was also interested in her and what she was doing and how she thought and how she moved. And he was just so intrigued by her bold personality and her willingness to play chess with herself and her willingness to like come after him and talk to him, you know, like a person, because everyone talks to him like a king. And I think that I love that you could see why they loved each other. Again, like that's what I'm here for, right? And it helps that the two of them had so much chemistry. Oh my god, even in the episode Even Days, when they're just like, ugh, I don't like you, I can't stand you. But you know, it is an even day. And it's like, oh yeah, it is. And I think they even tried to do it. She tried to do it with him on an odd day too. It was so funny. It was great. I loved it. And it was when she would like lie to Lady Danbury and be like, yeah, yeah, it's the worst thing ever. You like, and it's like cutting with her, like having the time of her life. I love that. Like, girl, you love having your man. You love having your man around. Okay, you can't wait to go. You can't wait for your even days. Okay, and then when they did it at dinner, I was like, yo, not in front of everybody. Not in front of everybody. What are y'all doing? I. So they also have that. Like they also have that. Another thing I really loved was when she was giving birth and they were like, yeah, you can't be in the room. And he was just like, do you like being Archbishop? Okay, so you're going to let me in the room because I'm going to be with my wife. And he, I think, in many ways saved her life. right? Because obviously he's farmed a lot and he's dealt with animals and body parts and other births, so he has like some kind of inclination on what to do. And I love that Brimsley spoke up for her at that time too. Like, nah, she bleeding too much. They lying. Because again, these doctors with these degrees, they don't know nothing, right? And so I love that the two men in the room, her two road dogs for life, really spoke up for her in that moment in a way that if the women in the room had said that, I don't think would have been heard. And in that moment, Lady Danbury gets to witness their love because she talks a lot about it in present, like, nah, they in love. They in love for real. And she gets to see that with them eye to eye during the birthing. And I thought that was really beautiful for her to be like a real witness. Because obviously she's been hearing a lot of complaints or whatever, but to like really kind of see them together, I'd be like, oh, I see it now. I see it. So yeah, I thought everything about Charlotte and George were great. I do think, obviously, and we'll get into this in a bit, you know, you have the black women having to kind of have the world kind of on their shoulders thing that we have to deal with. But overall, I do think that, yeah, I think it was great. So then we kind of move into, um, oh, the other parallel that I love. This will come up again, but I love the R line because she always says your father's line, your father's line. He's like, no, it's our line. Like we have these kids, and that's obviously one of the things that we see them say the last time we see them in the past, and then we see them say that again under the bed. And the under the bed scenes, you didn't go over the wall. No, George, I did not go over the wall. Whew. That scene and the scene in that same episode when it goes from Brimsley and Reynolds dancing together to it just being Brimsley. Okay, then just knock me in the heart. Why don't you? Like what? So yeah, those things were so heartbreaking. I know that there's an interview that says that Reynolds and Brimsley, the actor who plays Oda Brimsley, said that they actually did write a scene. I'm not sure if they shot it with him and Oda Reynolds, and like they still recognize each other. And there's no like resentment, but they're obviously not together anymore because queer people could still be hung back in that time. So I'm glad they didn't put that in because I want to imagine a life. I love when they're like in the tub and they're like, well, if the queen and the king stay together, then we get to stay together. Essentially, like we both be living here too. I'm like, that is so cute, right? And they have so many cute scenes as well. And I want, in my mind, I'm like Brimsley and Reynolds end up together and they stay together as long as Queen Charlotte and King George, and then Brimsley, I mean, not Brimsley, Reynolds passes away before Brimsley does, and that's it. Obviously, I think that because of what Brimsley says in the present, because it's not actually present, to Queen Charlotte, when he's like, how would I do that? I didn't have any time to do that with, you know, being with you. It leans more towards the fact that they broke up. Like they just couldn't do it because of time, because of getting caught, because of all these different things. But in my delusional brain, we gonna go with the fact that they lasted and they were in love because that's what I wanted for them and that's what they're gonna get. So that's what happens when you leave stuff open ended. I get to make up stuff and be delusional. So leave me alone. And the actors playing younger Brimsley and younger Reynolds were amazing. I'm not on IMDb right now, and this is getting kind of long, but I do want to just point that out. So before we get to Lady Danbury, which I think is going to tie into some of the weaker points on the show, not Lady Danbury herself, but some stuff tied to her. I do want to also say shout out to Violet. She was a woke queen. And, you know, her her mother. I'm sure her mother, first of all, is rolling in her grave knowing that she has black and Indian grandchildren. I mean, great grandchildren. Like, shout out to the Bridgertons for being like, yeah, we're not doing any of that. And yeah, and then her father obviously like fell for a black woman, and so there's that. Which is I'm so interested too to see why he had to be married to this woman. Um, and like obviously people were forced into marriages more so back then. But I'm curious about that kind of dynamic being married because he's like so obviously not racist and she so obviously is. And so I was very curious about that, but I love Violet just being like, yeah, none of that over here. Lady Danbury looks good as hell, and yeah, can I curse on YouTube? I don't know, but Lady Danbury looks good, and it is what it is. Whatever. She was so sweet, and yeah, and that's also gonna tie into some issues I have not with Violet, but issues I have sometimes with how people handle race stuff. But Lady Danbury. First of all, let's okay. So I am going to have to do a quick IMDb for her because this is so important to me. Let's see. Shout out. I think it's like Arsimia or something like that. Arsima Thomas. Baby girl was born in Atlanta, friggin' Georgia. I was about to and she is playing a British woman because American actors are more than capable of playing people from different cultures. Like we can do accents too. I hate when people say that we can't. It's like no, we're just not given as many opportunities to unless we're Meryl Streep. And so like we can also do it. So I love that. I loved it when I found out when I was watching the interview and I heard that American accent. I was like, how oh. And like as an actor, I actually have gotten to do accents quite a lot, but it's actually been on the stage. The last accent I did was a French Cameroonian woman. Every single time I do one, people say to me after the show, people actually from those ethnicities that they would have known that I wasn't part of it. So like it's obviously like that's come with a lot of practice, but like there's so many American actors who are more than capable, and I'm just tired of American actors always getting a short stick when people talk about actors because there's so many great American actors. But I could go on a whole nother rant about that. But shout out to Arsema. She's one of the most beautiful people I've ever seen. She absolutely killed it. Her circumstances were so sad. Her husband, that whole the first I'll talk about her and then I'll get in detail with her husband. But I, I, I actually so all of this we're gonna kind of start going into some of the issues I have with the show. But I do want to say I loved her acting. I love everything, every scene she had with the princess. That crying scene when the princess like, no, we're not gonna do this. I actually like you coming at me like this. I need for you to stand 10 toes down like you normally do. I love that. I really think the princess was the person because we always see Lady Danbury helping people and lifting them up, and I think the princess, even though it was a difficult relationship, in many ways was her teacher on how to be that person, that strong person in a world where um, women weren't respected. Because the princess, I love when she would use being a woman to her advantage. She'd be like, I'm a woman. I don't remember names, or she'd be like, well, the king said, knowing damn well it wasn't the king. So she was in many ways her teacher. And so I really, really love that. I love the friendship she had with Queen Charlotte. Obviously, that's reflected in the Bridgerton series, and you really get to see it here. And they are genuinely best friends, and really kind of seeing how they become that was really beautiful as well. Really reminding Queen Charlotte of her place in society, how important she was, what in like Queen Charlotte actually stepping up and be like, you know what, I am. I am that bee. I got here, I'm here, we should be doing stuff. I'm gonna do stuff in my community. She wasn't one of those black people who forgot who she was. Sometimes she had to be reminded, but it wasn't because she forgot, it was because she was distracted by things that were going on with her husband. Because anytime it was brought up, she was like, you're right. She wasn't trying to distance herself from it, which I loved. But she was also just distracted because she also loves her husband and he's been weird. So I loved all of that. Now, to get into some things I didn't like. Now, look, I am obviously a writer. I've written for TV before. And I understand that there are a lot of different factors that go into how a show is made, what gets on a show. There are voices in the room that, or things that are said in the room that never make it out of the room, never make it onto the page. And there are things that creators want that the network doesn't always want, or the production studio doesn't always want. Like, I get it. Um, like I said, I've been in a writer's room before. Uh, I do think Bridgerton has a race problem. Um, I don't think they like dark skinned people. Uh, I don't think. I did like, uh, weirdly enough, I actually like to hear that the actor who was playing Laura Danbury actually doesn't look like that in real life. I assumed he didn't just because the makeup looked like they had put a black person in blackface, which I already hate. Nina Simone. But I already hate that. Nina Simone movie, not Nina Simone. If you know, you know. So I was already bothered. Obviously, he had on like the worst wig ever. He would tell her not to like be a mess or look a mess, and I'm like, sir, have you looked in any mirror, any mirror? But I was so happy to know that like the actor is actually really attractive in real life. Doesn't look like that at all. Because I think that would have been cruel to like get someone who looks like that. Although, like I said, no one actually looks like that because you can kind of see the makeup. But who, wasn't attracted to do something like that. I think that would have been really messed up. But yeah, the show loves to highlight light skinned people and or people who are biracial in a way. Even with them, they still suffer too, right? Our girl from the first season, Marina, um, really suffer in like really harsh ways. Another thing they do is they make all the black women incredibly strong. One of the things I love about Violet's character is how soft she is, even in her older age. There's just like this sweetness to her. And I think that all the black women, Marina, the owner of the Modiste, who is like probably the softest of the four, but the owner of the Modiste, um, the Queen Charlotte, Lady Danbury, they always have to be so tough. And Queen Charlotte obviously has to, she like it in the real like story of King George. He actually has like a big episode when they first get married, and then he has another like 20 years later, and then he has another 20 years after that. And that one like pretty much leads to everything going downhill. So they do get between like 20 and 40 years of like semi peace. I'm sure in between that she had to do a lot to keep everything running because I'm sure he had other mini episodes that we just didn't know about. So she had to deal with that. She had to be the queen. She has to be black, at least in the show. Right now we're back to the show part. So there was a lot on her shoulders, but I do like when she is with George, she is soft, but even sometimes with that, she has to be commanding because George is so like fragile, and she has to be the one to kind of step in and be more commanding. And that's another reason I really love the birthing scene because she gets to be like the vulnerable one, and he has to be the more commanding one. And so he has to like step up for her as well. And so I like that for that reason. Um, but yeah, I had my biggest problem with the show. My biggest problem with the show was how they treated Black motherhood. Um, they make okay. Granted, women were seen as baby machines. That's true. That's fair. That's real. And I like to a degree that Lady Danbury is someone who didn't want kids, right? But was forced to kind of have them in this system. And part of the reason she doesn't want to get remarried is because this show can't have black love. No, I'm kidding. But but part of the reason she doesn't want to get remarried is that she doesn't want to have any more kids. When she hears that, she's just like, no. And so she doesn't want to be held down. So I love that we have this woman who didn't want kids, didn't want to get married. That makes sense, like that there will be women like that. It doesn't quite make sense with the character she is in the present. And they have that whole line about how she's like, oh, my kids did me the favor of living across different continents. This is why it doesn't make sense. The whole first season of Bridgerton is about Lady Danbury encouraging her essentially adopted son to get married. Right? She is the one who raised Simon and took him in, and she also like sponsors families. She's very much so like a motherly figure. It doesn't make sense. I get it if you want to tell the story of every time she looks at her kids, she sees this man who she was essentially given off to and forced to breed and have sex with. So every time she sees her kids, she sees him. And there's like a trauma there. That would actually be an interesting story on how you deal with that because your kids didn't do anything, right? And how you deal with that. But I think it becomes a cruel story when you look at the fact that she took in Simon and did all this stuff for Simon, and she didn't do anything for her own kids, and always kind of talks about, oh, they live far away now, don't care, So it doesn't line up with her character, like why she would take if she doesn't want kids and doesn't want to be around kids and doesn't like kids, why would she then take in this kid from her best friend? And she does it effortlessly. She doesn't do it like, oh, this kid. Like, at least if we would have had that in the first season of Bridgerton, obviously they didn't know they were going to have a spinoff, then it would have made like a little bit more sense. But it doesn't make sense for her character that she would neglect her kids in that way, considering season one and how big, like, of a mother essentially that she is to Simon. It also doesn't make sense for Queen Charlotte. Because Queen Charlotte, one of the first things she says to Lady Danbury in the past is when her husband dies is, oh my God, the kids. Because she's worried about Lady Danbury's kids. And I want to say, is that also the scene where Lady Danbury gets the idea, oh yeah, I have kids, like he could be Lord Danbury? I can't remember, but like that's one of the first things Queen Charlotte says to her. When Queen Charlotte is late to the party, or something with Parliament, I can't remember where it was in the show, but King George says to her, like, where were you? She's like, I was with the kids. So I'm just like, from what we know about Queen Charlotte and King George, they love their kids. So it doesn't. So in the present, when we see them and Georgie's like, George the Fourth is just like, even like the whole Sorrow's prayers things make her seem like she lacks empathy. And I know that that's kind of how her character was introduced. Like that's how she talks to people. It would have been a lot more interesting if that was how she talked to people outside of her circle, but not how she talks to people in her circle. Then you could be like, okay, she is a queen, but she is, and that would be more consistent with the past too, because she's a queen. She will tell people, get off of my man. Everybody get out of here. Y'all not about to experiment on him. I'm the queen. I said what I said. But with her man, she's really soft. That would also make sense in the present. Like, I'm going to talk to these subjects how I talk to these subjects. You either the diamond or you not. Get out of my face. But when it comes to my kids, I care about them. The fact that she didn't even know that her daughter was having multiple miscarriages, and obviously you see the care in her face, but then it's got like done in a flash, literally does not make sense for her character, right? Especially when we hear that her daughters didn't really marry because they wanted to stay with her. It's like they love their mother, which means that she had to, at some point, to be willing to give up your life. You're not going to do that necessarily for a neglectful mother, right? You could, maybe, if you see that they're like struggling in other ways. There is a version of that could have worked. Like she had to give up a lot to take care of George and like kind of run the kingdom and deal with her son probably having to step in and all these other things. But it's just like there was an inconsistency there, because even when she says to George, be a doll and like approve of your brothers getting married, he so easily does it. But then, because there's a clear love for his mother, but then later on he's like, but you were never a mother. And it's like, okay, well, I don't know if he would have so easily done that if that was the case. I don't know. There's like this, there's two different stories you could have told. You could have told the story of she was struggling to be a great mother because she also had to be a great queen and hold things up when her husband was going through all this stuff, and because her husband was going through all this stuff, she had to take care of him so much that it became hard to take care of her kids, let alone so many. Right? That could have been an interesting story, but it's not like consistent, right? And so we don't actually know, and we don't actually kind of get those answers. And in the present, she just seems to lack a lot of empathy that I just need to know how she got there, because that is not the person that we knew her to be in the past. And it wouldn't make sense that she would become that person, because she spent her whole life taking care of someone, right? So she would probably be somebody who is super empathetic to other people. So, and maybe there could have been a bitterness that grew there, but there doesn't seem to be a bitterness. Even when she asked like about her husband, like, is he dead? There's a sense of anxiousness there too. So I don't know. To me, it felt really inconsistent to make them like bad mothers. Also, too, black mothers have been caretakers for everyone throughout centuries and have raised generations of for multiple races and cultures, just because of sometimes our place in society, but also because I just know a lot of really nurturing black mothers. So to have a show where you have multiple black women who are just not super nurturing doesn't make sense to me. And the one like main black couple we have, the one main black mother who is super nurturing, it's like a side couple, right? Which is Simon's best friend and his wife, but like we don't really know much about them. So it just feels, I don't know. It doesn't sit right in my spirit. And so that's the parts where I kind of have to use a little cognitive dissonance and be like, okay, I love this show. I love this show. I love this show because it's accomplishing the romance, and that is why I love the show. We're not going to talk about the race part. So, so that was like a big problem for me. I also didn't love that Lady Danbury fell in love with this married man. Again, I understand being trapped during that time. And I love that she finally got some good sex. But I want to see her fall in love again. And I feel like they said that like Violet may get a spinoff and we may see her fall in love again. I want to see that for Lady Danbury because she's like 15-ish years older than Violet. And so I would love to see her fall in love, because her great love was this guy who she got to sleep with once and couldn't even really be with. That's so like unsatisfying to me. So I would love to see I would watch a Violet spinoff too, because I love Violet, but I would also watch a Lady Danbury spinoff. I think they're both great characters. Um and I think their younger counterparts is so great that I think it would be a waste to not. I would love to see a show about an older woman, like finding that love. Um the only other thing I wanted to see more of is I wanted to see more of their life. Like, because like I said, they do get like a lot of years together where before he gets dementia, before he goes deaf and blind, like they get quite a lot of happy years together. That's why the stuck in time comment, while sad, and like I know a lot of great people are like tweeting about that, it also like didn't, it does hit in a way because she is kind of stuck in time, but not that far back. She's probably stuck in time because of his dementia, which is probably like a more recent occurrence. And so I don't think she's stuck in time because of his bipolar disorder or blood disorder, because that was managing itself for quite a few years. Like a lot of stuff happened during King George's reign that he was there for. So I just, that part, I I I don't like, I get it, it's sad, but it's also just like there's a big gap of time before that happens, right? So it didn't super hit for me. Um and I wanted just like a montage of them through the years, hosting parties, him speaking to Parliament, him losing America. Also, there's some really interesting stuff that he said about losing America, and how he felt about America. That's really interesting, actually. But Yeah, I just want, and apparently he said some really interesting stuff about slavery too. I saw the section of slavery in his Wikipedia and decided to skip, but I saw another video that homie was like, "Yeah, that's stupid." Uh, but don't quote me on that. I haven't actually read about it yet. But if that's the case, I like him even more now. But yeah, and I love that he was someone who thought people could never love him. Meanwhile, he was surrounded by all this love, right? And he had Queen Charlotte, he had his mother, he had the Kingsmen and Reynolds. He has so much love and support and people who cared about him. And I think that's a really important message for people who struggle with mental health to see. And I love that. And that's even more reason why I wanted to see them over the years and see him be, because she was his anchor. She was, but she wasn't his only anchor. Reynolds was also an anchor for him. His mother was also an anchor for him again. So, like, he had this community of support. And I really wanted to see a montage of that and to just like see these people love on him, and see him and Queen Charlotte love on each other and see him get out more, and see them, have 13 kids, and see them live a life before it does get really tragic. The end of their life is really sad, but there's so many great years in there, and I think that is such a rare thing. It's a thing that people, again, with mental illness hope for. Um, and so, yeah, I just thought it was so beautiful. I thought the actors were perfectly cast, not even just in the looks department, but in the chemistry department, in the acting department. I love that they had an in-person chemistry read. You can tell because they are incredible together. And I just thought it was great. And funny enough, I actually had my hair in a ponytail, and then I had to put it up for something else, and I was like, "What? I'm afraid dress like we Charlotte." But yeah, so I was really in love with this show because I think it accomplished what it wanted to accomplish with the romance. Um, but I don't think Bridgerton does race well. I did love everything about Sierra Leone, because we do come from an entire continent where there are lots of different kinds of people. People love to say we were kings and queens because we were. And the richest man in history is not that Bezos guy. Is actually Mansa Musa. But so we were, but we were also farmers, and we were also tribal leaders, and doctors and healers and griots and storytellers and all kinds of other things as well. And we also have wealth. So I did love all, and we still have many of those things too, and we are still many of those things. Um, so I did love that. Uh, yeah, but I overall I don't think the show does race that well, and so I understand why there may be some bad people who are like, yeah, it's a no for me, dog. And I just be like, I get it, I get it, because I gotta turn some brain cells off. But I also love Queen Charlotte's afro, of course, um, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger over the years. I love all of it. Um, and yeah, overall I thought it was great. I we rarely see shows where people with mental health disorders are loved in this way, and to know that this is a real story and it's really happened and he really was loved, makes it even better. And Queen Charlotte was just amazing and just beautiful, and the "Do You Love Me?" and "I Love You," and "I was standing between heaven and earth for you." Farmer George under the bed. So many great things. Brimsley and Reynolds, again, such great support systems for both of their, for the king and the queen. Um, and they had their own beautiful love story. And I was really happy about that too. And just beautifully done. Beautiful show. Best Bridgerton ever Bridgerton, even though there were no Bridgertons. And yet. um, and yeah, that's all I got. My favorite characters, my top three favorite characters are Queen Charlotte, King George, Lady Danbury, and honorable mention was Young Violet. I just thought she was wonderful. And yeah, that's it. Let me know what y'all thought in the comments. This is beautiful, and I will see you guys in the next review and discussion. And I hope you get loved on today. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.